This ain't no therapy session. This is hardcore deconstruction. And the thing about deconstructing is, it's pulling on the strings of our reality sweaters. You pull on them too much, too long, too hard, you'll go blind. No, sorry, that wasn't even right when my grandmothers told me that. And why would a grandmother tell that to a child anyway? Deconstruction. You risk upending your reality when you tug on those strings the wrong ways. It's why doing this sort of thing with some guidance is essential to coming out on the other end of it, Humpty Dumptied and put back together again. If you don't have horsemen and all the Queen's people, you're just a street omelet. This series focuses more on tugging at the strings of our virtual reality sweaters. I'm upending our social media and internet realities, your virtual reality. In the great social media experiment, I'm taking a look at my personal journeys through the internet and social media, what I've learned, and what you need to know. We've talked about grooming and how this deflection on social media is just the latest to target marginalized communities with propaganda, misinformation, and hate speech, while the real grooming is going on right under our noses every day and has been since Reagan took office. I discussed the toxicity of social media culture briefly, trolls and all that. That'll come up a lot more in this series. In the great social media experiment, I'm going to discuss my personal perspective on social media as entertainment media a little bit more. I've touched on how we, the content creators, are being exploited by big tech and how we, the content consumers, pay the price. And now we're being asked to pay the price, literally too. I'll go ahead and explain those different categories of we, the social media folk, in this series as well. We're talking about how, for all the ridiculing of participation trophy culture and everybody gets playing time mentality, here we are in a world where just anybody and everybody thinks they're the next, well, whatever the current big thing is, where you can literally pay $25 and go live streaming on one of the most popular platforms today. I'll tell you that hack in this show too. I'll talk about the corruption of infotainment media by the masses when there are no standards or even guidelines. I'll talk about how social media is providing voice to so many while censoring and silencing us at the same time. This one's going to be hard. And if you like devoting most of your life staring into your phone for hours on end at 15-second intervals, yeah, maybe skip ahead. Well, just look for the next episode that isn't the great social media experiment part whatever. For the rest, who are ready to dig deep and maybe unplug from the matrix, welcome to the podcast. This is as much about the balance of good and evil online as it is about our personal responsibility of what we allow our children to consume versus what protections and regulations should have been imposed upon us to ensure, well, not that we didn't have a choice in what we consumed, but maybe we shouldn't have even known we had a choice until we, the people as a society, as a culture, were ready to handle it. I'm just not sure that freedom was in anyone's best interests. The freedom I'm talking about, of course, is the blown open floodgates of infotainment media. In less than half a century, we've gone from Walter Cronkite at the news desk to under-the-desk news. With all respect due, I'm a fan, but that's a showcase to how far we've advanced in the methods we have available to deliver the information. We must also admit that for some, that shtick is what it will take to draw their attention and hold it for more than 8 seconds. That is a knock against us and our dwindling attention spans. That's part of this dumbing down and numbing down of our society that I've been talking about. There's also truth to the science of human development and learning that would suggest offering a variety of ways to communicate the same idea would benefit those who can't sit through Cronkite. There's biology at play with some of this attention span stuff, but that's science. That's a given. What I'm talking about is also science. Just like you can evolve your muscles through diet and fitness and your brain through learning, You can train your brain to devolve. Just as your muscles can atrophy if you don't use them, your brain will devolve if you don't work it. Why do you think old people do puzzles, Sudoku, crosswords, and word searches? They're trying to stave off the mad cow as long as they can. Now, I'm not saying you have to have the attention span to watch an old man read the news in a monotone voice, or that you enjoy watching Under the Desk or any other creative social media creators' take on information, that it means anything in particular. What I'm saying is we must understand the differences in the journalistic standards of then and now, and the difference in journalistic integrity between then and now. Less focus on the delivery and style of production. With Under the Desk News, you've got a brilliant and captivating LA Times employee named Vitus Spear, or V. I've never met V or interacted with V, but I was a fan from the first time my wife introduced me to them. I'm pretty internally critical when it comes to any media, simply from the perspective of the critical eye I had to have while I was in broadcast media. I'm still in media. Josh Brandon Media produces Overthinking Everything. I mean, it may be a one-man show, folks, but this one man is media. I don't label myself an expert, but I do have expertise. Plus, I've always sort of had an efficiency expert's eye for things, constantly seeking faster, better, more convenient ways to accomplish the same goal. It's not a lot to be critical of with V. The concept is witty, the delivery is on point, it's clean, tight, fresh, sharp, perfectly put in layman's terms, as many say it. It's always been said to me as dumb it down, but I've never been smart enough to do that. So when I see someone brilliant enough to be brilliant, and even more brilliant to be able to express brilliance, but, brilliant enough to express it in ways most people can understand, well, V does it well. V does it right. V is a good social media example of a hip, modern, and professional journalist with guidelines, standards, and a sense of journalistic integrity and responsibility. V's chosen delivery method is for entertainment purposes only, just like many of my own and other creators as well. That's what sets everyone apart, if anything does. And V certainly stands out. I haven't seen them try to issue a lot of apologies or retractions, and that's probably due to the very cut and dry nature of the actual stories. V nails the delivery and the writing in a way that you get what you need in a tight little info package, set in a way where it sticks without interjecting a lot of personal ideas and telling you what you should think. Vitus Spear is the exception to the social media rule. For every Under the Desk news, there are thousands that try to mimic that shtick to varying degrees, without the LA Times atmosphere, the education, resume, or experience, much less the flair and gravitas brought by V. Or standards, or understanding of journalistic integrity. See, that's stuff you learn in school, academically, in communications law classes, taught by lawyers. I wouldn't have said that my undergraduate degree in communications would have paid off a lot. For most of my media career, had I come from a different place, a better place, I could have just interned in high school, started a career, and done more than what I did trying to do what I did with a degree in that field. But most of my bosses, they didn't even know I had a degree or care that I had one. They just knew I could program the hell out of a radio station. Today, that undergrad, all the English, journalism, communications law, history, sociology, psychology, all those things I learned and continued to learn through the years provide me with a unique layer of perspective many don't have, especially when talking about social media as an entertainment and infotainment media space. I discussed in previous episodes how many people don't realize they're viewing TikTok, YouTube, and Insta or whatever in the same ways they would Netflix, Hulu, or Amazon Prime. They also don't realize they consume Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon Prime the same way they had previously consumed cable, and before that, ABC, CBS, and NBC. For many, social media is a toy. It's a distraction. It's an app, not a channel, but in fact, it very much is its own network. TikTok is a network, just like Netflix with their original programming, and then some of your other favorites. You've got people who only TikTok, and then you've got social media influencers from other spaces who are also on TikTok. Beau of the fifth column. He's one creator I was exposed to through one social media platform, but it was from content originally posted on another platform. Even though I've been on YouTube long before I was ever on TikTok, I'm not much of a consumer of social media. I'm a creator. The habits are different. It wasn't until I got on TikTok that I saw Beau's content. It was edited and shortened versions of his longer form videos on YouTube. Kind of like I need to do with Overthinking Everything. Volunteers? Well, Beau is another one who does it right, and a great example of social media cross-pollination. Still, wherever you're watching V's or Beau's or my content or anyone's content, you're watching TV. It's the same thing. It's just not counted as the same thing to we, the creators. But you, the consumer, they get us to create for free, providing them with all this free content to distribute so you come to their platform and they can sell you ads. Ads sometimes the creator gets a micro fraction of, but most of the time we don't. We don't see money from the ads or the gifts you send us, and if we do, it is again a micro fraction of what you spend on we, your favorite creators. Social media. It's just reality television. So what's the difference? One's free, one you pay for. And on that TikTok or YouTube network or whichever platform, you've got all these different channels. YouTube flat out calls them channels. My channel is Josh Brandon Media. They just say the quiet part out loud because they are the video social media standard and they can acknowledge what they are and what they want to be and what they want to compete with. TV. But just as I mentioned, there is no comparison between broadcast and any other form of information delivery. Broadcast, AM, FM radio, and VHF, UHF TV only are regulated and governed by the Federal Communications Commission. Social media, the internet, streaming, cable, they aren't. Now, that isn't to say that there aren't guidelines and whatever, but as far as being considered legally broadcast with FCC oversight, that's limited to radio and television signals specifically. These broadcast industries and technologies, they're not going away because the tech is necessary in times of emergency. For the privileged masses keeping up with the Joneses, we pay for our 8 separate streaming platforms because we like that one show on BBC, but Disney Plus is putting out a new Marvel show I have to watch because of cultism. And have you seen the new Ted Lasso? Where is that at? Oh, it's on Apple. Apple has a channel now? Oh yeah, well I've got a Droid. Does Samsung have a channel? Not yet. Who knows why? Everything else has its own channel. Josh Brandon Media does. But we were so quick to cut the cord from cable, weren't we? But we were so quick to jump on the cable bandwagon back in the day, weren't we? But we've just repeated the same cycle with social media and streaming, haven't we? The issue today is the market for entertainment and information media is so saturated because literally anyone can do it now. It's so much harder to find the content that matters to you because you just scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll, distracted by this, distracted by that. Whatever's in your feed, whatever the almighty algorithm feeds you, if that's not being corrupted. But we know for a fact now that it has. And we'll get to that soon. Entertainment media is about consumption. Radio needs you to listen longer through the commercials. TV needs you to do the same thing, but with your eyes. What good are you to them if you don't watch their show? If you don't stick around for the first commercial, you may as well not even bother tuning in at all. For decades, big ad dollars were spent on broadcast media. A lot of money still is, but with viewership trends leading to social and virtual spaces, the airwaves are a shadow of the cash cow they were 30 years ago. Radio advertising airtime on music radio specifically is becoming more obsolete every single day. Why would an advertiser spend their money to advertise on music radio? Radio sales teams will come up with a million reasons why, but when compared to the most influential methods of advertising, if you're not on a specific niche format on broadcast media, a radio commercial is throwing money out the car window. This is why you see so many media corporations bundling their services with an online strategy. They understand how futile the efforts of broadcast are, short-term and long-term. Now, this may not be as true in smaller markets where the medium is more customized and essential to that community. Certainly is true in rated markets, however. And maybe less true even in those markets among more niche station formats like talk, news, sports. But overall, in general, music radio is dying. How can TV and radio compete? Terrestrial radio is struggling to keep up with its own competition, like satellite streaming services and our own personal libraries. Look, I have over 6,000 songs on this SD card, this little SD card that goes into my car. Zero talk, zero commercials. How can a non-visual medium compete with those and visual media, such as streaming, television, YouTube, etc.? All for an 8-second attention span if you're lucky. The stations and shows I see that are doing this well are the ones who do live videos of their breaks or behind the scenes when they're not on the air. They provide cross-content on air and through social media. Some of the talent take to social media to build their brand in their off time. Some do weekly vlogs, video chats, live videos. Others do features and Facebook posts, TikToks, etc. Today, talent needs to be focused on building a brand. However, think bigger than that. Why settle for being a part-time celebrity? Go full on. Find talent who can create a YouTube channel and provide compelling content. It's out there, just like Under the Desk News. When I was a morning guy, the radio show preparation services I used provided so much stuff, interviews, clips, news articles, all that stuff. And so much of it I would never use on the air. It was either C-grade material, filler, or we just didn't have time. But with an additional, less restrictive playground like social media, you can actually have your talent build your brand online using some of that stuff, if nothing else. All it takes is a small studio space in your radio station somewhere. Your logo should be your backdrop, and if you let your talent be personalities, your brand will grow. Let them be the personalities they need to be. Sorry, you're too late. That whole spiel was something I wrote like 5 years ago about the end of radio's relevance. Oh. It turns out every single person in America today, the world, can pretty much and has pretty much done the same thing already. Podcasts? Everybody has a podcast. I have a podcast. I have several. This is just one of them. If you're a radio or TV talent now and you don't have a podcast, what are you even doing? Actors, comedians, musicians, everybody has a podcast. Everybody has a show. If you don't by now, quit. Find something else to do. Why aren't you doing it? This is a very fluid space. It's ever-changing. But it's the ocean, and everybody's grabbing a boogie board and catching that wave. Don't get left beached. I don't know what to tell you to do when you get in the water. The big thing today may shift to something completely different in a few months. Hell, a few weeks. Hero today, gone tomorrow, out of sight, out of mind. It's just to say that there is no mold to break. Trying to succeed through someone else's mold on social media is like trying to ride the same wave twice or predict a big wave. I don't surf. Maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. Somebody will comment. But today, so many in that space are hoping for and even trying for virality. That 15 minutes of fame, trying so hard. Creators doing whatever it takes to outdo themselves and each other. And platforms desperate for relevance, they tweak their own systems to force things to go viral. Or not. Creators exploiting others for entertainment with no regard for consequences. The shiny thing that distracts us and forces us to provide that invaluable social media currency, reaction, it may be any number of things. But what it very much is manipulated and corrupted. Everything that glitters is not gold. And even what is gold, all that gold is in a bank in the middle of Beverly Hills in somebody else's name. Those aren't just classic country song lyrics. All that shiny virality, it's just more of the mass manipulation we've all been experiencing all along. And it's filling someone's bank account, but it isn't ours, not the creator who made the viral video or the consumers who made that go viral. Now, that might not matter to you. Being pitched things in your algorithm that you don't sign up for or that are being put in your feed because someone's making money on it. The reality is you should be making money when they market to you. You're the consumer. It's your time, attention, and mind they're consuming. It's your bank account they want to deplete. While you could be out doing something worthwhile and useful, you've chosen to consume their product, giving up your own prosperity for that distraction. Or haven't you logged how much time you spend in front of a screen yet? Why do we allow them in our minds rent-free? You have the power. Without you, no one's watching, no one's buying. And then, what are we doing any of this for? Well, with Overthinking Everything, it's because I feel like it needs to be done, regardless of if I make money at it. But for many content creators, your modern-day TV and radio hosts, the financial struggle is real. Why? Well, when professionals begin demanding their due pay and recognizing their value in a system, well, when I was in radio, when the poorly paid full-time talent would start complaining about how poorly we were paid, literally everywhere I worked, we were threatened with being replaced with the eager up-and-coming part-timers or cheaper, desperate, unemployed talent seeking one of the few jobs left. Good luck finding something else, I was told. I had job offers until I walked away from radio, thank you. I even got job offers years after I was out of radio. But the pay problem never got fixed and the industry only got worse. I had some things to say to the industry, and the industry never seemed to want to listen to what I had to say. Honestly, to this day, I feel like I had some answers for how radio could have remained competitive and relevant. What a shame. Local radio could have been, even today, a breeding ground for creative professionals. Instead, they're just fancy Spotify playlists that keep interrupting every 3 songs for shit you don't want to hear. With several social media apps becoming legitimate streaming platforms, and consumer habits on social media being exploited as much as the creatives who make the content you're consuming, the same unhealthy and poorly compensated working conditions exist online as did in broadcasting the last 2 or 3 decades. And just when it seemed the doors were opening in broadcasting for more and more talented people who just never got their shot, deregulation cut off any of that momentum. By the time broadcast media rebounded, the internet and reality TV was the new space for getting that big break. If you worked hard and put together quality content, you'd finally have a shot at being discovered online. But while radio and television were staring at their ratings, they were oblivious to the audience who wasn't consuming their content, but who might. In that time, social media blew open the gates to just let anybody on. Everyone had a radio show or TV show they could pick. No, who's stopping them, Pick your platform, build your brand. Literally anyone can have their own channel. And that drowns out many of the experienced professionals and semi-pros who still adhere to journalistic integrity and standards. It's like the differences between network and cable. Remember I talked about in previous episodes? If one must work within creative boundaries and the other can color outside those lines, which do you think will be more appealing to an audience who don't know no better? Most people don't consider the thing on cable that makes that show better is actually something a bit too problematic or extreme for consumption without context. That's an academic psychology deep dive most people don't even want to think about, much less before they sit down in front of a TV show. Social media sees those same parallels. If you have some creators who are operating within the lines of some sense of journalistic integrity and ethical standards, and then you have other creators who just don't know or just don't care, they just want it out there first, damn the consequences, then the audience looking for the next shiny thing, just like the moth who doesn't know no better, will be attracted, drawn into the flames of misinformation, confirmation bias, and propaganda. We are a society of shifting blame and avoiding responsibility, aren't we? From another perspective, though, just like it seemed when there was nothing on TV and it cost so much money to produce the stuff that was really popular, media companies realized people will watch literally anything, including a few friends sitting around talking on the phone together about nothing. After all, there were like 20 seasons of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Look at all the really big reality shows. The Real World, 30-plus seasons. Survivor, 40-plus. The Apprentice in all its forms globally. Any of those talent shows, the cooking shows, the competition shows, just those reality shows where they don't even do anything. They're a gold mine. They're cheap to create. But what if they could make them even cheaper? What if they could make them for free? And so social media realized that their audience would watch literally anything too. So they made sure everyone got a participation trophy. Everyone got their shot. Everyone with $25 can buy enough followers to go live on TikTok within a few minutes to a few hours with a simple Google search on how to buy followers on TikTok. Anyone. Oh, and anyone can buy you followers. There's no accountability or proof that you're buying your followers. Just your payment and the username. That's literally all it takes. Let's just hope no one is buying you 1,000 followers at a time, and that those followers are in fact real followers and not AI bots trained to report your content every time you post something or go live. The $25 gets you your own broadcast channel where you can go live on TikTok and speak your mind to the masses. Anyone can. And that's great. It's wonderful that more voices get heard. Yes! Power to the people. Except we now know that all these platforms use tactics and methods that aren't all that pure and probably not all that legal. They pick and choose their favorites. Our trends are usually decided for us. And if you didn't pay attention to your feed before you really started scrolling on that new account, did you even pay attention to what you were being fed? What they wanted you to see before you told them what you liked seeing? I did. And I'll talk about that in this series as well. It's pretty disturbing. The evolving media landscape veering more toward amateurism than professionalism is both encouraging and alarming. For the first time in history, people have an easier time having a voice without the barricade of gatekeepers with their hands over the microphones. Someone could be living on the street, homeless, and manage to have a phone. They could reasonably find places that have free Wi-Fi. They could be a social media star, posting their daily struggles and just being someone real who is the real face of the real homeless plight in real America. Look, it can cost money to do all this. It doesn't have to. These channels have no gatekeeper like traditional broadcast media. There's no way any boss I worked for in broadcasting would let a homeless person walk in off the street and have their own show. You want to know what else these virtual online or social media channels have that radio and TV don't have today? Personalities, celebrities. Not necessarily always talent, mind you, but personalities. Granted, a lot of radio and television pays their talent barely houseable wages, which may be why radio is losing listeners by the droves. Local TV is seeing viewership dwindle. So where are those consumers going? They're looking for what they want when they want it. They have a lot less tolerance and patience for what radio and television wants to give them. TV and radio's potential audience are flocking to services like podcasts, TikTok, and YouTube because they crave celebrity. They crave personality. They crave consuming content from creators with whom they can relate. They crave customized content. Radio isn't giving that to them. TV isn't giving that to them. If we aren't given celebrities, we, the people, will create our celebrities. I used to think that broadcast could bounce back as media options, but The more we evolve as a people, the more we want it now, Daddy. Just like Veruca Salt. 5 years ago, I'd have suggested radio's remaining relevance was to relate to the regular rube. Today, I'm not so sure that works the same way. I've been a talent coach for many years, dating back to my experience as a radio programmer. When you're the program director for a radio station, you either work on your talent coaching skills or your entire brand suffers. Most stations employ pricey consultants, but even they can't be present every day to critique and offer input. And when they do, as valuable as it may be, they aren't in your market feeling the pulse of your community. That's where your local program director comes into play, or should. If your program director isn't air checking you at least once a week, then you need a new PD. And if you're in radio and you just ask me what air checking is, you need a new general manager too. We are in the waning days of broadcast's last breaths. Now, I'm not saying broadcast media will cease to exist, like I said earlier, but it will cease to exist as we have known it. It has to. This isn't a doomsday clock thing. This is a warning to radio, much like the one Blockbuster didn't get before Redbox made them obsolete, and the one Redbox didn't get before Netflix made them obsolete. Now that so much has come along to make music radio obsolete, I'm saying there is a way forward where the medium can survive and thrive. Maybe. But everything that comes along seems to do it better, whatever it may be. Music? You got fewer commercials and less talking on satellite. You've got even fewer commercials and talking on Spotify. You've got none with an SD card loaded with your all-time favorites. News? Information? Anything else is available on my phone. I'll get a notification about the big story before I'll hear anyone on radio or TV tease the details of the big story coming up after the break. Broadcast radio and TV sold out their audience's best interests for capitalism, commercialism, and chasing that almighty dollar. Surprise that their audience is leaving in droves, without realizing they're leaving for spaces that aren't much better. Look at broadcast media, even social media like this. When you throw a party and people come to your party and they don't have a great time, they'll leave. Even if they're stuck staying, they don't have a ride or whatever, they ain't coming back for round 2. Now, imagine you threw a party and everyone came that you invited. You had some great music. Your hosts were telling great stories, anecdotes, jokes. You had snacks, you had drinks. It's a hootenanny. You're giving away concert tickets as a door prize. Then your host stands up and says, "Hey, great time, everybody. If you could please sit down for a few minutes and give Dave your attention. Dave has a presentation for us." Then you realize you were invited to a pyramid network marketing cult recruitment and not an actual party. You were lured to the party under false pretenses, baited with music and a good time, and switched with a pitch. Radio and TV turned their backs on serving their communities. The warning signs for broadcast were there. It's like the Queen song Radio Gaga warned. So don't become some background noise, a backdrop for the girls and boys who just don't know or just don't care, and just complain when you're not there. You had your time. You had the power. You've yet to have your finest hour. Seems like radio heard that and said, "Finest hour? Hold my beer and watch this." When I was a programmer, I was known, or so I was told, among other things, for making a small market radio station sound big. I never wanted my stations, the ones I programmed or the ones I consulted, to sound like small market stations. They didn't need to sound like they were in a small town. Listeners in small towns deserve all the whiz-bang big cities get, right? I always thought so. I tried very hard to provide that for my listeners, from the music, imaging, promos, contests, talent, even the commercials. When I got into radio in the 90s, stations were all about the talent. The major radio stations in the market which I was working all had local celebrities. Every day part had a following. Today, you'd be hard-pressed to name local talent outside of a morning show, and even those are rotating doors of talent, like WKRP, town to town, up and down the dial. If they're even in your market. which a lot of the time they're not. They're syndicated. Why is this? Greed, that's the easy answer. But the answer lies in much of the deregulation and re-regulation I spoke about in the last several episodes. When the FCC rules lifted in the early 90s and then the Telecom Act of 96, radio stations focused less on serving their communities and more on streamlining the costs and cutting staff to cover their exponentially expanding loan debt for all the stations and companies they'd gobbled up so fast. For the last 2 to 3 decades, there's been a very concerning push to depersonalize the talent in radio. Some of this comes down to budgetary concerns. If I'm good, you gotta pay me. If I get ratings, you gotta pay me more. If people love me, if I have fans, well, then I have the negotiating power. And I've suddenly become as big, if not bigger, than your brand. Then if I go across town to the competition because you won't pay me enough, how many of your customers, clients, and audience do I take with me? So radio bosses learned. Keep it generic and people won't notice when I'm replaced. Social media is no different. Radio can be a lucrative business for ownership. However, for the talent, carving out a respectable living in most markets has proven difficult. In my own career, the on-air side of the building were referred to as expense line items and denigrated for how overpaid the jocks were. Overpaid at $30,000 a year. That tells you how we were valued. In other markets, getting full-time jocks to even be given full-time hours, be given an actual salary instead of just under full-time hours, that was a struggle. It's those benefits that are expensive to an employer more than the salary, you know. My experiences aren't universal, but they certainly aren't unique. To this day, speaking out about this type of treatment will surely get you blackballed. In an industry I don't care to ever work in it again. And where the decision to depersonalize personalities came from, I'm not sure. When my career began, there was a lot of griping about consultants insisting radio personalities stick to reading liner cards. As a programmer and consultant, I can see that side of it. If you don't have talent that's growing, the least damaging thing you can do is provide them a script and tell them to stick to it as much as possible. However, this wasn't always just the talent's shortcomings. This was a deliberate effort to create generic and easily replaceable talent. I was told once that we didn't want our midday show to excel too much because when the talent's ratings got too good, they would either leave or ask for more money. Then, if they built up a huge following, replacing them would be a hassle. People would complain and ask where they were. That's paraphrased, but you get the gist. Now, how that makes any long-term business sense boggles my mind. In fact, it didn't make any business sense, and now you have bigger stars on social media than at any local radio station. This is just some of the frustration I see today with social media. Just as many areas of my profession started to get the acceptance, acknowledgement, and respect they deserved, well, Copperhead Carl from Flagstaff moseys along from his desert sun-bleached back porch in a leather vest and cowboy hat, saying something really funny but in a flat, dry tone. And then he moseys out his shot, and we're all like, share, follow, comment. I'm not knocking Carl. I made that up, by the way. I'm sure there is a Copperhead Carl somewhere, and if so, I apologize. I didn't bother looking it up. But while we can say that Carl wouldn't have been seen 20 or maybe even 10 years ago, today Carl's getting thousands of reactions on every video. That's a great advancement, where there's more opportunity to follow your dreams, whatever they might be. The flip side to that is, when I was in high school in my rural, nothing Tennessee town, there simply wasn't anything offered. You were an athlete or an academe. There wasn't much room for in between, unless you went off to Votech or ROTC, which I don't even remember us having, but we were across from a National Guard armory, so who knows. It's one of those towns where you smoked, drank, did drugs, caused mischief, or had sex a lot. What else was there to do? Video games. We didn't have anything. No school paper, no theater. Mine was a graduating class of under 90 kids, and a lot of them I never even saw. I'm lucky as hell I even got into any of this. any of this. My journey is of luck and privilege. Voice acting, TV shows, movies, commercials, TV news, radio, all of it. I can trace back to a few single moments of pure happenstance. In what amounts to split-second decisions in my life, they changed and altered everything after, and I became this. But I almost wasn't. And who knows if I would have ever stepped on a stage in front of a microphone or on camera, ever, if not for those split-second moments of chance and universal serendipity. So the evolving and exploding landscape of social media as a positive for the creators and more opportunity to showcase more talent, that is something I wholeheartedly embrace. I don't need other people to struggle for me to succeed, and if that's what it takes, I don't want it. I didn't have an easy path, but even as lucky and privileged as I had it, I'm saying most people who would have loved the opportunities I've had, they didn't even have that luck, privilege, or those split-second happenstances I'm talking about. I'm not saying those less professional shouldn't be here. Social media is the amateur space where people cut their teeth and sharpen their skills now. We should acknowledge how hard it was to make it in music before American Idol, and we should accept how difficult it was to make it in just about anything before social media. I'm advocating for more professional training and finding ways to make us all better. Production value-wise, delivery and style, and ethical standards. For all the debate about censorship and the First Amendment, we have to step outside our biases and think about what actually we should allow on social media, the internet, for the greatest good. Is liberty allowing everyone access to everything all the time, regardless of the consequences? When any and everyone is allowed to have their own channel, and those who should regulate that space leave it to personal responsibility, then who holds those personally responsible? We're trained to belittle those who talk about themselves. They're braggarts or whiners, or they dominate the conversation, right? Think about this. How have you been brought up to perceive those who talk about themselves? What words do you use to describe them? Selfish? Narcissistic? Self-absorbed? This hypocritical humility is part of that Southern charm, more of that toxic white Southern culture. That isn't to say that all Yankees are boastful. It's to say that the Southern cultural moray of remaining humble is reinforced and exacerbated by the ideals and values of the toxic white Southern culture I'm discussing in Overthinking Everything. It's professing humility while espousing ideals like supernatural delusions of grandeur and holier than thou simply by the idea that I'm saved and you're not. That's supremacy any way you shake it. It's just repackaged not to look racist. So we were taught that talking about yourself is just not something good people do. We reinforced that with statements that denigrated those who dared speak about themselves at all. More of that all or nothing mentality we love in America. Rather than teaching us nuance, we just kept it safe for the masses and said, now don't go blabbing about yourself to everybody or they'll think you're stuck up. But the nuance we missed, especially these last few decades, is that asking that pivotal question from the last episode, what does any of this have to do with me, is encouraging critical thinking. We have to see how these issues affect us so we can process that and then communicate our message more effectively to how this might affect others. However, in this demonization of self-analysis and introspection, we've come to a dead end on self-awareness. You see, self-awareness is a journey that never ends. A lot of people are just parked in one place, thinking they've got it all figured out, or not really thinking having any of it figured out is even important. Social media as a whole has raised our awareness of issues and amplified the voices of the several, but it's kept silent many more voices, by whichever platform deciding which voices deserved that amplification. In this world where we just click the box to accept the terms of service so we can hurry up and have the fun already, We take for granted the platform will have our best interests in mind when delivering us content. However, much of that content is already manipulated and corrupted by ad dollars. Then you take the internal processes of whichever platform. You can see that giving voice to so many at once, someone has to scoop the cream from the top. Who's scooping the cream? Does it matter to you? As a consumer, does it matter if wherever you are online, what you see in your feed is chosen for you as much as it is the result of what you consume, react to, and interact with online? Now, if it's an issue of percentages, what percentage of the content you're pitched in your feed would you be comfortable with being non-native to your habits, or something you're pitched that you didn't really ask for? Advertising is non-consensual messaging. This balance of content certainly is up for debate. Up until now, most people simply haven't cared. Many do. And so we see many leaving Facebook, Twitter, TikTok because of the intrusive nature of their tech. We see many more people scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and smiling and not thinking about what it's costing them. But how many of us have ever dealt with someone who couldn't look up from their phone? How many have seen someone who wants to spend time with us not be able to put their phones down? We've seen it in ourselves, I'm willing to bet. We don't want to accept that we're being brainwashed with actual addiction science, and that the mere fact that we can't put our phones down without experiencing symptoms of nomophobia should tell us the dire circumstances we are in as a people. For the consumer, I'm saying it's important to treat this as they've created it. It's an all-you-can-eat, a la carte buffet. We're no longer relegated to 3 channels and whatever they want us to see. We're now in limitless channels of whatever they want us to see. It's okay to hit the dessert table, but for God's sakes, get some nutrients on your plate too. Fill that with documentaries to counterbalance the fast cars and furiously fit follically challenged fellas. For all the superhero schmaltz, sprinkle in something serious or sappy. If you're consuming things like South Park, Big Mouth, or raunchy comedy movies, outdated and problematic programming, without any cultural context, don't be surprised if your mindset begins to devolve and shift back into those ways of thinking. Watch and see what slowly becomes normalized language or behavior for you. Combine your choice in music and whether that dehumanizes others, video games you choose to play, and what messages that sends your brain. Well, it's the basic law of complacent, convenient consumerism. It's easier to shop on the inside aisles of the store. Tossing the contents of a box into some water and bam, a hot stove later, you got a meal in minutes. We'd sure rather do that than shop on the outside aisles where all the ingredients for meals are. Then we have to cut them up and cook them, and then we got to clean. Well, you know what? That's just time consuming. I could probably just eat at a drive-thru a lot cheaper, faster, and no mess. Before long, we've spent how long consuming the most toxic consumables, all the while telling ourselves, I really need to stop eating this garbage. And then we don't listen to our own cries for help. It's, well, if I'm going to eat this way, I at least need to exercise. And we don't. Well, then we're less crying for help and more just saying we need to change out of obligation because even we know we don't plan on changing. Changing is too hard. We'll just have a massive coronary at 54 years old and think, boy, if I would have made those changes at 38, maybe I could still have sex. Well, we're doing the same thing to our brains, folks. We're feeding our brains the lowest hanging fruit, and we aren't filling our profile plates with a nutritious balance of essential virtual vitamins and media minerals. In fact, social media is not a part of this complete breakfast. That statement was a legal disclaimer in a cereal commercials for years. Packed with 12 essential vitamins and minerals, it's a part of this complete breakfast. But what does any of that even mean? It means This sugary frosted introduction to diabetes is meant to be in very small bowls with skim milk and served with eggs, juice, meat, and non-sugar drenched whole grains. Maybe a little dairy that isn't sweetened with the sugary frosted residue of the cancer food. What, they didn't tell you cancer feeds on sugar? There's a lot they don't tell us about food science and nutritional health. So they made this fun commercial with their little cartoon mascot, making all the kids happy with their cocoa-blasted, fruity ring, sugar-coated, honey-covered corn, rice, wheat balls, flakes, or otherwise processed shapes. Then, at the end of that little appealing brainwashing session, with a cute, catchy mnemonic or jingle to further cement that in your brain, they remind you that even though this looks pretty and makes your mouth water, we've also processed some good stuff in there too. And it's a part of this complete breakfast. And they'd show a full breakfast spread the size of which no one human should eat in one sitting. And they'd show that healthy breakfast spread for about 1.5 seconds at the end of the ad. Social media at best is frosted mini wheats. It may seem more good than bad, but if you flip it over to the side you don't want to look at, you'll find it's just covered in cancer food. It's just sugar like all the rest. And you may put that sweet side face down on the spoon so you don't see it, but it's the first thing that touches your tongue when you eat it. You may be telling your brain you're trying to be healthy, but all the brain gets is the signal of sugar. Addiction. It's because we don't treat social media or the internet like a part of this complete breakfast. We don't even treat cereal like that. Cereal has become breakfast. It wasn't really meant to be breakfast. It was a breakfast substitute or a side dish to breakfast. But America took this thing of convenience and grabbed a bigger bowl, a bigger spoon, and emptied half a box into their gullets at a time. Why? The cereal was more appealing and easier than the eggs, bacon, sausage, toast, juice, fruit, and other parts that completed that breakfast. By the time all that stuff became convenient, comparable, and affordable enough to be the instant alternative to the real deal, America's consumerist, capitalist cereal and drive-through breakfast habits were cemented. Social media and the internet, just like cereal, offers the sugary frosted convenience, easy to find, easy to consume, and often just as toxic to your system. The healthy stuff doesn't trend, and why would it? Who benefits in all of us being better? Then, what do we need to buy? We, the people, need to recognize the dangers posed with extreme and unregulated use and exposure to everything. We need to take back our power in this system and remember that there are dangers and the cultisms tied to social media and internet addiction. We must remember that we need a healthy balance of mental diet, just like we do digestive nutrition. But we must also realize, recognize, and acknowledge the very real threats posed by the mass consumption of social media and the dangers that can pose to society as a whole. We must also realize, recognize, and acknowledge the very real threats posed by the creating of social media content by those untrained in journalism, research, and standards. Lastly, we must realize, recognize, and acknowledge the very real threats posed by the consumption of social media to our mental health. Most consumers and creators are untrained in psychology and mental health. Most are untrained in many of the disciplines of communication dissemination, or what that means. But there are many traumatic effects that nomophobia, the fear of being disconnected, phone or social media, internet addiction, and the overconsumption of what may not even seem all that traumatic content can do to alter one's mood, personality, mental status, and life. In fact, in this series, you'll find out that content moderators for some social media platforms have sued those platforms for the trauma caused by the disturbing images they were forced to endure. If you think what you have seen on social media is disturbing, just imagine the things you don't see. Just imagine what the filter catches. With social media being the amateur creative playground, it's never been more important than ever that we, as creators and consumers, understand the true costs of what we are consuming and creating, and the platforms we use to consume and distribute that content. Coming up, I'm going to deconstruct more of my journey through social media. While I talk in this episode a lot about social media from the perspective of an entertainer and my experience as a professional broadcaster, well, I'm going to be going a little bit deeper, back to some of my perspective on social media as entertainment media just a little bit more. I'll explain how social media has cliques, hierarchies, and classism all its own. I'll explain the different types of people on social media, from creators to consumer creators and creator consumers and everything in between. This series on social media is about to take a dark turn into some of the trolls, misinformation, manipulation, propaganda we're all exposed to. All of it we should be protected from. Remember that. We are deliberately exposed to it. We deserve to know why. The realizations and revelations I've uncovered about myself, for myself in this journey, about social media, disturbed me. And you'll be shocked to find out what really goes on behind the scenes on social media and how it affects us personally and society as a whole, as I'm deconstructing a culture of cultism. Thanks for joining me. Hey, check out some of my other videos on YouTube. I've got them all in these playlists organized for your convenience. All of my original music, my archive of TikToks, all of Overthinking Everything, clips of my acting and voiceover career. All of that is right there, easy for you to find. Check out my merch store. Get your Sir Talks a Lot, Swags a Lot trigger gear. Follow me on TikTok and every other social media platform. Like, share, subscribe to this channel, do all the things I need you to do if you like this series. Please consider a donation to Cash App. And make sure you sign up for my email list to keep up with me, even if I get banned on social media. I'm Josh Brandon, and I'm overthinking everything.